A lavish anniversary party becomes a public trial. A husband's betrayal, a mistress's cruel victory speech, all in front of the city's elite. "He's mine, now," she whispered, a diamond engagement ring flashing on her finger. "He's having a baby with me." The wife Emily stood alone, her world shattered into a million pieces amidst the pointing fingers and silent judgment. They thought she was broken. They thought she was defeated. But what they didn't know was that the quietest person in the room was about to unleash a power so immense it would not only silence her enemies, but buy the very ground they were standing on. The invitation was embossed in gold leaf on cardstock, so thick it felt like a sliver of marble. "Mr. and Mrs. Marcus Thorne request the pleasure of your company to celebrate 5 years of marriage." For Emily Thorne, holding it felt like holding a beautifully crafted lie. 5 years. The first 2 had been a dizzying, sun-drenched haze of love. Marcus with his sharp blue eyes and a smile that could disarm corporate raiders had swept her off her feet. He was a rising star in finance, a man of ambition and magnetic charm. Emily, an art historian with a quiet passion for Renaissance portraiture, was his serene counterpoint. Their friends called them the perfect couple, his drive her grace, his world of numbers and risk, her world of beauty and history. But the past year has felt different. The gold had started to flake, revealing something cold and grey beneath. It began with small things. The late nights at the office that smelled not of stale coffee, but of a cloying, unfamiliar perfume, something floral and aggressive, like Chanel No. 5's louder, brasher cousin. Then came the hushed phone calls he'd take on the balcony, the guarded screen of his phone, the emotional distance that felt like a chasm opening between their king-sized bed. Emily was not naive, but she was a believer in commitment. She'd tried. She suggested counseling. He said they were too busy. She planned romantic weekends away. He had a last-minute merger to attend to. She saw the signs, the tiny red flags that, when stitched together, formed a banner of betrayal. Yet she clung to the hope that this was a storm, not a change in the climate of their marriage. The anniversary party was Marcus's idea. "We need to show everyone we're stronger than ever." "Ellie," he'd said, his voice a little too bright, his hand on her back a little too performative. "Let's book the Serafina Grand Hall at Montague. Go all out. A celebration for us." Emily knew what it really was, a public relations campaign. Rumors were starting to circulate in their elite social circle. Whispers followed her at charity luncheons. Pitying glances were cast her way at the country club. Marcus, ever conscious of his image, wanted to quell the gossip with a tidal wave of champagne and extravagance. He was using their marriage as a shield for his reputation. On the evening of the party, Emily stood before the full-length mirror in their palatial Upper East Side apartment. She wore a custom-made gown by Carolina Herrera, a deep sapphire silk that matched her eyes. Her only jewelry was a string of pearls and her wedding rings. She looked the part of the perfect corporate wife, elegant, poised, untouchable. But inside her stomach was a knot of dread. "You look stunning," Marcus said, walking into the dressing room. He was already in his Tom Ford tuxedo, looking every bit the master of the universe. He kissed her cheek, a dry, fleeting touch. Ready to dazzle them. "Marcus," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Are we okay?" He adjusted his bow tie, avoiding her gaze in the mirror. "Of course we are. Why wouldn't we be? We have everything. Everything except honesty," she thought. "Everything except you." He finally met her eyes in the reflection. For a second, she saw a flicker of the man she had married, a flash of guilt, of regret. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a polished mask of confidence. "Tonight is about us, Emily," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Let's not spoil it. Smile. We have a performance to give." He called it a performance. The word hung in the air between them, brutal and honest. As they descended in the private elevator to the waiting town car, Emily felt a profound chill. She was walking onto a stage, the lead actress in a play whose tragic ending she could sense but hadn't yet read. The Serafina Grand Hall was waiting, and with it the final devastating act of her marriage. The Serafina Grand Hall was a masterpiece of old-world opulence. Crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, dripped light onto a sea of exquisitely dressed guests. The air hummed with polite chatter, the clinking of baccarat crystal, and the gentle strains of a string quartet playing Vivaldi. Waiters in crisp white jackets weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and canapés. It was a scene of calculated perfection, precisely as Marcus had intended. He was in his element, moving from group to group, shaking hands with banking tycoons and laughing with society doyens. Emily was at his side, a graceful shadow. Her smile practiced and her eyes betraying nothing. She accepted compliments on her dress, on the stunning floral arrangements, on their beautiful marriage. Each word of praise felt like a tiny, sharp stone striking her heart. She was speaking with Mrs. Dubois, the undisputed queen bee of their social set, when the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a subtle change at first, a ripple of whispers that started near the grand entrance and spread through the crowd like a contagion. Heads turned, conversations faltered. Emily followed their gaze. Standing in the grand archway was a woman who was the complete antithesis of Emily's understated elegance. She was poured into a fire-engine red dress that clung to every curve with a slit that climbed dangerously high up her thigh. Her hair was a cascade of raven curls, her lips painted a matching defiant red. She was stunning, but in a way that screamed for attention. Emily felt a cold, sickening jolt of recognition. She had seen that face before, in a tagged photo on Marcus's social media from a business conference in Miami, a photo he had hastily untagged. This was Isabella Rossi. Isabella scanned the room with the predatory gaze of a leopardess, her eyes landing on Marcus. He had been mid-laugh with the senator, but the sound died in his throat. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pallor of pure panic. For a moment, the master of the universe looked like a terrified boy, caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Isabella began to move through the crowd, a shark gliding through the water. The guests parted for her, their curiosity mixed with a delicious sense of impending scandal. She didn't look at anyone else. Her focus was entirely on Marcus, and by extension, Emily. "Marcus, darling," she purred as she reached them, her voice loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. She completely ignored Emily, placing a perfectly manicured hand on Marcus's chest. "I couldn't bear the thought of you celebrating without me." Mrs. Dubois' eyebrows shot up to her hairline. The senator suddenly found a pressing need to check his phone. The circle around them widened as people leaned in shamelessly, eager to witness the carnage. "Isabella." Marcus stammered, his voice tight. "What are you doing here? This is a private event." "Oh, I know," she said, her smile a slash of red. She ran her finger down his lapel. "But our relationship isn't exactly private anymore, is it? Not after Aspen, or the Hamptons, or that lovely week in Lake Como. Each location she named was a trip Marcus had claimed was for a solo boys' weekend or a vital business retreat. Each word was a dagger twisting in Emily's gut. The whispers around them grew louder. This was no longer a party. It was a public execution. Emily stood frozen, a marble statue, amidst the chaos. She could feel hundreds of eyes on her watching, waiting for her to crumble, to scream, to cry. She did none of those things. A strange glacial calm settled over her. The hurt was immense, a physical ache in her chest. But something else was rising alongside it, a cold, clarifying anger. She finally looked at her husband, truly looked at him. The panic in his eyes was not for her, not for their marriage. It was for his reputation, his meticulously crafted image now being torched before his very eyes. He wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Isabella, a frantic, pleading look that said, "Not here. Not now." That look told Emily everything she needed to know. The hope she had foolishly clung to evaporated. This wasn't a storm. The climate had changed forever, and she was standing in the icy heart of a new, desolate winter. Isabella finally turned her attention to Emily. Her eyes, dark and triumphant, raked over Emily's sapphire gown with contempt. "So you're the wife," she said, her tone dripping with mock sympathy. "Emily, Marcus has told me so much about you. It's a pleasure to finally meet the woman I'm replacing." The string quartet had mercifully stopped playing. The silence that filled the grand hall was thick and heavy, broken only by the frantic, excited whispers of the guests. Isabella Rossi had captured her audience, and she was clearly reveling in the spotlight. "Replacing me," Emily's voice was surprisingly steady, a low, clear note in the cacophony of gossip. It wasn't the hysterical shriek the crowd had been hoping for. Isabella's smile widened a cruel, self-satisfied curve. "Don't play dumb, it's unbecoming. This whole charade," she waved a dismissive hand, indicating the opulent room. "The guests, the very party itself, is over. Marcus and I are in love." Marcus, finally finding some semblance of his voice, tried to intervene. "Isabella, this is not the time or the place." He reached for her arm, but she snatched it away. "Don't you dare!" she hissed at him, her voice a venomous whisper that still carried in the charged air. "Don't you dare try to manage me. Not anymore. I'm done being your dirty little secret. I'm done waiting in hotels while you play the dutiful husband." She turned back to Emily, her eyes glittering with a victor's malice. This was her moment, the culmination of months, maybe years of scheming. She wasn't just here to claim Marcus. She was here to obliterate Emily. "He doesn't love you, you know," Isabella continued, stepping closer, invading Emily's personal space. "He might respect you. He might be fond of you like one is fond of a comfortable old armchair. But he doesn't desire you. He hasn't for years. He comes to me for passion, for life, for a woman who understands what a man like him needs." Emily remained silent, her posture impeccable. She held Isabella's gaze, refusing to give her the satisfaction of looking away. Inside her heart was hammering against her ribs, each beat a painful reminder of the 5 years she had dedicated to a man who was now standing by, paralyzed, as she was, systematically dismantled in public. "You're probably wondering why now," Isabella said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial yet theatrical tone. "Why I chose tonight, your special night, to make my entrance." She paused for dramatic effect, letting the anticipation build. Then she slowly, deliberately lifted her left hand. On her ring finger was a massive canary diamond, so large and garish it looked like it belonged in a museum exhibit on volcanic rock. It was a stark, screaming contrast to Emily's elegant, understated platinum wedding set. "Marcus asked me to marry him last week in Paris," Isabella announced. A collective gasp went through the room. "He's just been waiting for the right moment to tell you." Marcus looked ashen. "Bella, that's not—" "We didn't—" "Oh, shut up, Marcus," Isabella snapped, not even glancing at him. "Don't be a coward now." She looked back at Emily, her expression a toxic mix of pity and triumph. And then she delivered the final, devastating blow. "There's more," she said, placing a protective hand over her flat stomach, a gesture universally understood. "The real reason we can't hide anymore, the reason you have to step aside. I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." If the engagement ring had caused a gasp, this news detonated a shockwave through the hall. It was the ultimate irrefutable checkmate. An affair was a scandal. A divorce was a tragedy. But a baby was a new beginning, a new dynasty. And it made Emily in that instant a relic of the past. Isabella leaned in her voice now, a sibilant whisper meant only for Emily, but her triumphant expression was for everyone to see. "He's mine, Emily. The man, the future, the family. It's all mine now. You've lost. Just sign the papers, take your alimony, and disappear gracefully. It's the only thing you have left." For the first time, Emily's composure faltered. Her eyes flickered with a deep, profound pain. The baby. That was the one thing she and Marcus had tried for, the one dream that had never materialized, a source of quiet, private sorrow for years. And this woman, this stranger, had been given it so easily. The hurt was so sharp, so blinding, it almost brought her to her knees. She felt the world tilt, the faces of the guests blurring into a grotesque tapestry of judgment and morbid curiosity. She had lost. Isabella was right. She had lost everything. All eyes in the Serafina Grand Hall swung from the triumphant mistress to the humiliated wife and finally to the man caught between them. The silence was absolute. This was the moment of truth. Every person in that room, from the most powerful CEO to the youngest socialite, held their breath, waiting to see how Marcus Thorne would react. It was a crucible, and his character was about to be tested in the most public way imaginable. Emily looked at her husband, a silent plea in her eyes. It wasn't a plea to take her back, not anymore. That ship had just been torpedoed and sunk. It was a plea for a shred of dignity for the 5 years they had shared, for the vows he had once made. Deny her, her eyes begged. If not for me, then for the memory of what we once were. Don't let this be how it ends. Marcus met her gaze, and in that fleeting second, she saw his soul laid bare. He was a man drowning in his own choices, suffocated by the consequences of his weakness. He saw the woman who had stood by him, supported his ambitions, and created a sanctuary of peace for him to come home to. And he saw the woman who offered him the intoxicating thrill of the new, the ego-stroking validation of her obsession, and now the air he had secretly craved. He broke eye contact with Emily first. He turned to Isabella, his expression shifting from panic to a weary, reluctant resignation. He took her hand, the one with the garish yellow diamond, and squeezed it. It was not a gesture of passion, but of surrender. Then he faced the silent, watching crowd. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the cavernous room. "I apologize to all of you for this," he began, his voice strained. He was trying to project an image of a man taking control, but he just sounded like a cornered animal. This was meant to be a private matter. He turned to Emily, and his words, when they came, were colder and more clinical than any of Isabella's taunts. "Emily," he said, refusing to meet her gaze instead, staring at a point somewhere over her shoulder. "Isabella is right. Our marriage, it hasn't been working for a long time. We've been living separate lives. I've been unhappy." He was rewriting their history in real time, painting her as a participant in their marriage's failure, making it a mutual decay rather than his singular betrayal. He was absolving himself. "I didn't want it to happen this way." He continued, the false sincerity dripping from every word. "I wanted to tell you privately with respect. I was going to. But things have accelerated." He glanced at Isabella's stomach. "There are new responsibilities I have to consider." He was choosing the baby. He was choosing the future Isabella represented, and in doing so, he was erasing the past he shared with Emily. "I think it's best if we handle this quietly," he said, the sheer audacity of the statement stunning Emily into stillness. He was asking for a quiet divorce in the middle of a public spectacle he himself had orchestrated. "I'll have my lawyer, Mr. Peterson, contact yours in the morning. I wish you all the best, Emily. I truly do." It was a dismissal, a corporate severance package delivered with a hollow semblance of professional courtesy. He had not only failed to defend her, he had actively sided with her tormentor and publicly cast her aside. He had validated every cruel word Isabella had uttered. The crowd erupted in a flurry of hushed, scandalized chatter. Mrs. Dubois looked at Emily with an expression of pure, unadulterated pity, a look that was more insulting than any scorn. Emily felt utterly, completely alone. She was a ghost at her own party, a footnote in the story of Marcus Thorne and his new family. Isabella slid her arm possessively through Marcus's, resting her head on his shoulder. She looked at Emily over his tuxedo, her eyes gleaming with absolute, unquestionable victory. She had won. She had taken everything. Emily finally let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. The pain was still there, a white-hot core in her chest, but the cold, clarifying anger from before was beginning to crystallize into something harder, something sharper. It was the calm of a person who has finally hit rock bottom and realizes there is nowhere to go but up. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. She would not cry. She would not scream. She would not give them the satisfaction. She had lost her husband, her marriage, and her dignity in the space of 10 minutes. But as she stood there, isolated and exposed, she made a soul-so-silent vow that she would not lose herself, just as Marcus turned to lead Isabella away, as if to shepherd his new life from the wreckage of his old one. A new presence made itself known. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a shift in the air, a change in the room's gravitational pull. 2 men stood near the entrance to the hall where Isabella had made her grand debut. They had not been there moments before. They were older, dressed in immaculate conservative suits by Savile Row that whispered wealth rather than shouting it. They stood with an unnerving stillness, their quiet authority cutting through the room's chaotic energy. The man in front was in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes the color of a winter sky, sharp, intelligent, and currently filled with a glacial fury. He held a presence that made CEOs and senators shrink. This was a man accustomed to being the most powerful person in any room he entered. This was Arthur Vance. Beside and slightly behind him was a younger man, clearly his son, with the same sharp eyes, but a more athletic build and a jaw set in a line of protective anger. He looked like he could dismantle a hostile takeover or a man with equal ease. This was Julian Vance, Emily's father and brother. They had not been on the guest list. Emily had specifically asked them not to come. Her family, the Vances, were notoriously private. They were a dynasty of old money from Boston, their empire built over generations in shipping logistics and private equity. Their wealth was quiet, vast, and deeply integrated into the foundations of global commerce. They did not flaunt it. They did not attend frivolous parties. They valued privacy and integrity above all else, which was why Emily's marriage to the ambitious new money Marcus Thorne had always been a point of quiet concern for them. "We don't want to intrude on your life, darling," her father had said. "This is your world, but if you ever need us, we are a phone call away." She hadn't made the call, but someone must have. Perhaps her assistant Clara, who had been with her for years and was fiercely loyal. It didn't matter. They are here now. Arthur Vance's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene with a practiced, analytical calm. He saw the triumphant mistress clinging to his son-in-law's arm. He saw the pitying, judgmental stares of the guests. And he saw his daughter standing alone, poised and unbroken, but with a universe of pain in her eyes. His expression hardened, the fury in his eyes solidifying into something cold and absolute. They began to walk forward. Like Isabella, they parted the crowd, but for an entirely different reason. People didn't move out of their way to get a better look at a scandal. They moved out of an instinctual, almost primal sense of deference. Whispers rippled through the room again, but these were different. "Is that Arthur Vance?" a hedge fund manager muttered to his wife. "Arthur Vance. What is he doing here?" "I thought he never left Boston," she whispered back. "Thorne must be more connected than I realized." Marcus and Isabella stopped their triumphant exit, halted. Marcus turned, and his face, already pale, went chalk white. He had met Arthur Vance only once to ask for Emily's hand, a meeting that felt more like a deposition, and once at the wedding. He knew on an intellectual level that his father-in-law was a powerful man, but he had never understood the true scale of that power. He had viewed the Vances as archaic and reclusive, a relic of a bygone era. He had fatally underestimated them. Arthur and Julian didn't stop at Marcus. They walked straight to Emily. Arthur reached out and took his daughter's hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Julian stood at her other side, a silent, formidable guard. They formed a protective wall around her. "Are you all right, Emily?" Arthur asked, his voice low and calm, meant only for her. Emily looked up at her father, and for the first time that night, she felt the ice around her heart begin to crack. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking with the single word. "But I will be." Arthur squeezed her hand. "Yes, you will." He then turned his gaze, which was now devoid of any warmth, onto Marcus. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The sheer weight of his disapproval was suffocating. "Marcus," he said, the name sounding like an insult. "You have made my daughter feel unwelcome. At her own anniversary party, in front of her friends, you have brought this person." He gave Isabella a look of such profound disdain that she physically recoiled into her life and humiliated her. "Mr. Vance, sir," Marcus began, his voice cracking. "This is a misunderstanding. It's a private family matter. There is nothing private about this room. Arthur stated flatly. "And you ceased to be family approximately 15 minutes ago. You have made a catastrophic miscalculation." Isabella, emboldened by her victory and ignorant of the true power she was facing, scoffed. "And who are you, some old man trying to defend his washed-up daughter? Marcus and I are in love. We're having a baby. There's nothing you can do about it." Julian took a step forward, his expression thunderous, but Arthur put a restraining hand on his son's arm. He looked at Isabella as if she were a curious insect. "Young woman," Arthur said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level, "you have mistaken a moment of poor taste for a lifetime victory, a common error of the short-sighted." He then turned away from both of them, dismissing them as utterly irrelevant. His gaze fell on a harried-looking man in a tuxedo, the Montague Hotel's general manager, Mr. Dubois, who was hovering nearby, wringing his hands. Arthur Vance looked at the manager, his eyes holding the cold, hard glint of a man about to move billions of dollars with a single command. "You," Arthur said, his voice clear and resonant, cutting through the silence of the hall. "You are in charge here," the manager scurried forward. "Yes, Mr. Vance. An honor to have you, sir. Is there a problem?" The true nature of the problem was about to be revealed, and it was far bigger than Mr. Dubois could ever imagine. Mr. Dubois, the general manager, practically bowed. "A problem, Mr. Vance? Anything at all, we can have a security escort." He trailed off, gesturing vaguely towards the source of the disruption, Marcus and Isabella. Arthur Vance held up a hand, a simple gesture that commanded absolute silence. He wasn't looking at Marcus or Isabella anymore. To him, they had ceased to exist. His focus was purely on the venue, the stage upon which his daughter had been so cruelly humiliated. "The problem, Mr. Dubois." Arthur began, his voice calm and deliberate, as if he were discussing a minor alteration to a dinner reservation, "is that this establishment, this beautiful hall, will now forever be associated with a rather unpleasant memory for my daughter." He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. The crowd was utterly captivated. This was a drama far more compelling than any opera. "The Vance family does not tolerate unpleasant memories," Arthur continued. "We erase them, or when that's not possible, we acquire them and change the narrative." A confused murmur went through the room. "Acquire them." What did that mean? Marcus stared, a dawning horror on his face. He was starting to understand the chasm between his world of flashy leveraged finance and the Vance family's world of quiet foundational power. He built things on debt and speculation. They owned the bedrock. Arthur turned his piercing gaze back to the manager. "My family's primary holding company is the Vance Global Group. I assume your hotel, the Montague, is part of the Sovereign Hospitality portfolio." Mr. Dubois's eyes widened in shock. "Why, yes, sir, it is." "I thought so," Arthur said with a nod. "My son Julian here heads our acquisitions division. He's had his eye on Sovereign for some time. They've been undervalued since their last quarterly report." "Julian, what was the figure we discussed?" Julian, who had been silent until now, spoke with the clipped precision of a surgeon. "Their market cap at closing bell on Friday was approximately $6.8 billion, Father. We currently hold a non-disclosed 7% stake. An aggressive offer at a 25% premium would be $8.5 billion. It's an all-cash offer they would be legally obligated to present to their board. Given their current debt load, they would be fools to refuse." A wave of genuine, audible gasps swept the hall. People weren't just whispering anymore. Phones were being discreetly pulled out. Financial journalists in the crowd were frantically typing messages to their editors. This wasn't just social gossip anymore. This was a market-moving event. Isabella looked utterly baffled. "What are you talking about? Buying a hotel? You can't just do that." "My dear," Julian said, turning to her with a look of pity. "We're not buying the hotel. We're buying the company that owns the hotel, and the 37 other luxury properties in its international portfolio. This building is a rounding error." Arthur Vance looked back at the stunned Mr. Dubois. "My personal assistant, Mr. Caldwell, has been on the phone for the last half hour with the chairman of Sovereign's board. They've just been made aware of our impending hostile takeover bid, which will be tendered at the market open tomorrow morning. However, to avoid any unpleasantness, we are making a direct offer tonight for this specific property. A prepayment, if you will." He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out not a checkbook, but a simple, elegant leather folio. He opened it and produced a single sheet of paper. "This is a letter of intent backed by a direct wire transfer confirmation from our bank in Zurich. We are purchasing the Montague Hotel, New York, the land, the building, the brand, everything, effective immediately." Mr. Dubois's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, his hand trembling. He looked at the screen, his face turning the color of bleached parchment. He looked up at Arthur Vance, his expression one of pure, unadulterated awe and terror. I've just received an email from our CEO," the manager stammered. He says to give you whatever you want. The property. It's yours, Mr. Vance. Welcome to the Montague." Absolute profound silence. You could have heard a pearl drop on the thick Aubusson carpet. Arthur Vance gave a slight, satisfied nod. He owned the stage now. He owned the building. He owned the entire narrative. He finally turned his attention back to Marcus and Isabella, who stood frozen, their faces masks of disbelief. Isabella's triumphant smirk had vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. Marcus looked like his entire world had just been liquidated before his eyes. "Now then," Arthur said, his voice as cold as a banker's heart. "As the new owner of this establishment, I have a few immediate changes to implement. First, the decor in this hall is now officially distasteful. We will be renovating. Second, we have a new policy regarding uninvited guests and vermin." He looked directly at Marcus Thorne. "You have 5 minutes to vacate my property, you and your associate." His eyes flickered to Isabella. "After that, I will have you removed for trespassing." The word trespassing hung in the air, a final brutal nail in the coffin of Marcus Thorne's social and professional life. He was no longer a host in a prestigious venue. He was an intruder in the Vance's newest acquisition. The guests who minutes ago had been watching Emily with pity now stared at Marcus and Isabella with a mixture of shock, contempt, and fear. They were witnessing a power play of such epic proportions it would be talked about for decades. In their world, wealth was power, but the scale of the Vance's power was something most of them had only read about. They had just witnessed a lion swatting a fly. Marcus hadn't just been defeated, he had been rendered utterly insignificant. Isabella was the first to break her ignorance, finally pierced by the terrifying reality of the situation. "This is insane!" she shrieked, her voice high and shrill. "Marcus, do something! You're Marcus Thorne!" Marcus didn't seem to hear her. He was staring at Emily, at the woman he had so casually discarded. He was finally seeing her not as his quiet, unassuming wife, but as the daughter of Arthur Vance, the heiress to an empire he couldn't even comprehend. The prenuptial agreement he had signed now felt like a noose around his neck. It was ironclad, drafted by the Vance family's legal team, designed to protect their assets from precisely this kind of situation. He would leave the marriage with nothing more than what he had entered it with. But it was worse than that. He worked in finance, a world built on reputation and connections. His biggest clients, his most important backers. How many of them had ties to the Vance Global Group? How many of them would drop him tomorrow morning to avoid being on the wrong side of Arthur Vance? His career was over. He just didn't know the exact time of death yet. Julian Vance stepped toward him, his voice low and menacing. "The 5 minutes started 4 minutes ago, Thorne. I suggest you leave. Oh, and by the way, my father sits on the board of the SEC's Ethics Committee. I'd make sure your trading records for the last 5 years are pristine. We have a feeling they might be getting a very thorough anonymous audit very soon." That was the final devastating blow. The threat wasn't just social or financial ruin. It was legal. It was total annihilation. Marcus grabbed Isabella's arm, his grip bruising. "We're leaving," he muttered, his voice a choked whisper. "But my announcement," she protested, still clinging to the tattered remnants of her victory. "The party's over," he snarled and began dragging her toward the exit. The crowd parted for them once more, but this time it was with undisguised scorn. As they passed the grand archway, a camera flash went off. A paparazzo from a society paper had caught the walk of shame. The photo would be on the cover of every gossip magazine by morning, the billion-dollar divorce. Thorne ejected from his own party. They were gone. The serpent had been cast out of the garden. The hall was quiet for a moment, and then a strange thing happened. Mrs. Dubois, the queen of society, walked purposefully over to Emily. She didn't offer pity. She offered respect. "Emily, my dear," she said, her voice filled with a newfound admiration. "I'm so dreadfully sorry you had to endure that. Your family is remarkable." She then looked at Arthur. "Arthur, it's been too long." It was a signal to everyone else. The social order had been re-established. Emily wasn't the victim anymore. She was the untouchable daughter of the most powerful family in the room. One by one, guests approached, offering apologies, support, and invitations. They were gravitating to power, as they always did. Emily felt nothing but a weary numbness. She had no interest in their fickle loyalties. She looked at her father and brother, her true family, her unwavering support. "Can we go home?" she asked softly. "Of course, darling," Arthur said, wrapping a protective arm around her. "Let's go home," as they walked out of the Serafina Grand Hall. Her hall, now Emily, didn't look back. She walked past the champagne fountains and the extravagant ice sculptures, past the wreckage of her old life, and out into the cool, clean night air of New York City. She felt a profound sense of release. The pain of Marcus's betrayal was still there, a deep, tender bruise on her soul. It would take time to heal. But for the first time in years, she felt free. She was no longer Mrs. Marcus Thorne, the perfect, quiet wife. She was Emily Vance. She was a part of something full and strong and enduring. She had walked into that party with a wife in a gilded car. She was walking out a queen who had just inherited a new corner of her kingdom. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to write. And she knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that it would be a masterpiece. The ride from the Montague Hotel to the Vance family's private penthouse overlooking Central Park was conducted in a profound, almost sacred silence. The custom Maybach moved through the city streets like a phantom, its sound-proofed interior insulating its occupants from the cacophony of New York life. Emily sat between her father and brother, the sapphire silk of her gown, a slash of deep color in the dimly lit cabin. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the public ordeal was beginning to ebb, leaving behind a deep, bone-weary exhaustion and a creeping, hollow ache. She stared out at the blurred city lights, seeing not the vibrant metropolis, but the ghost of Isabella's triumphant smile, hearing the echo of Marcus's clinical dismissal. The baby. The word pounded in her mind with a dull, rhythmic cruelty. It was the one piece of the betrayal that felt personal, a targeted strike at her deepest, most private vulnerability. When they arrived, their penthouse was a sanctuary of quiet luxury, unlike the opulent, almost theatrical grandeur of the Serafina Hall. The Vance home was a testament to understated power, museum-quality art. A Rothko here, a de Kooning there hung on walls of Venetian plaster. The furniture was modern and minimalist, chosen for form and comfort over ostentation. It was a space designed for thinking, for strategy, for living, not for performing. Arthur led her to a deep, comfortable sofa, facing a floor-to-ceiling window that offered a god's-eye view of the park. "Sit, Emily," he said gently. "Julian, get your sister a brandy." "I'd rather have tea," she whispered, her voice hoarse. Her father, the man who commanded a global empire, simply nodded, turned and went to the kitchen himself to put the kettle on. The simple domestic act was more comforting than any grand gesture could ever be. Julian returned and handed her a tablet. On the screen was the landing page of the Financial Times. The headline was stark: "Vance Global initiates hostile takeover of sovereign hospitality in dramatic, unprecedented move." Below it, a sub-headline: "Sources cite public altercation at a private event involving VGG heir Emily Vance and husband Marcus Thorne as the catalyst." It's already everywhere. Julian said, his voice a low rumble of contained fury. The business press is framing it as a power play. The gossip sites, he grimaced. They're calling it the billion-dollar takedown. That photo of Thorne being dragged out is the #1 trending image in North America. Emily stared at the screen, a strange sense of detachment washing over her. It felt like she was reading about characters in a novel, not living through the implosion of her own life. "You did all that, just for me?" "No," Julian said, sitting opposite her. "We did it for the family." Emily Thorne didn't just disrespect his wife tonight. He humiliated Vance. He did it publicly, thinking we were too distant or too reclusive to matter. He treated our name as a prop in his tawdry little drama. That is an existential threat we do not tolerate. Arthur returned with a tray bearing a porcelain teapot and a single cup. He poured the steaming amber liquid and handed it to her, his movements precise and calm. "Your brother is right," he said, taking a seat. "For generations, our family's greatest asset has been our reputation. We are known to be private, yes, but also for our integrity and our unforgiving memory. When someone attacks one of us, they are testing the strength of our entire foundation. If we allow one crack to appear, the entire structure is compromised. Tonight was not about revenge, Emily. It was about reinforcement." Emily wrapped her cold hands around the warm cup. "What will happen to him?" "He's finished," Julian said with cold finality. As of this moment, every line of credit Marcus Thorne or his small-time firm has been frozen or recalled. The banks that funded him are the same banks we've been doing business with for 50 years. A single phone call from father was all it took. His investors are in a panic. His partners are trying to distance themselves. By sunrise, Marcus Thorne will be a name so radioactive it will burn anyone who speaks it. And her, Emily asked the word tasting like ash. Isabella Rosie. Julian continued pulling up another file on his tablet. A former brand ambassador and aspiring reality TV star. She has a history of attaching herself to wealthy married men. The Canary Diamond, by the way, was leased. The lease expires next Tuesday. I doubt she'll be able to make the payment. She thought she was securing a future. Instead, she's tied herself to a pariah with a mountain of debt and a pending SEC investigation. The information was delivered with surgical precision, but it brought Emily no joy. It was just a catalogue of ruin. She had loved Marcus, once truly loved him. Seeing the architecture of his life being systematically dismantled, even after his monstrous betrayal, filled her with a profound and complicated sadness. "Father," she said, looking at him, her eyes pleading for understanding. "The baby. She said she's pregnant." Arthur's expression softened. He reached across and placed his hand over hers. "And if she is, the child will be a Vance grandchild, and it will be provided for. We are not barbarians, Emily. The child is innocent. But its parents have made their choices. Their consequences are their own." In that moment, Emily understood. Her family's power wasn't just in their ability to destroy, but in their unwavering code of conduct. They were ruthless with their enemies, but they protected their own, even the ones who hadn't been born yet. She took a sip of tea, the warmth spreading through her chest. The tears she had held back all night finally came not in a hysterical torrent, but in a quiet, steady stream of grief for the love she thought she had, the future she had dreamed of, and the innocence she had lost. Her father and brother didn't speak. They simply sat with her in the citadel of silence, a united front, letting her finally break so they could begin to put her back together. 1 week later, Emily stood not in a law office, but in the cavernous, now empty shell of the Serafina Grand Hall. The opulent chandeliers were shrouded in canvas, the Aubusson carpets had been rolled up, and the gilded furniture was gone. The room was stripped bare, a skeleton awaiting a new identity. The air smelled of dust and potential. It had been a week of relentless, quiet efficiency. The divorce proceedings were underway, handled by the Vance family's most formidable lawyer, a woman known in legal circles as the Velvet Hammer. Marcus, as predicted, had not contested a single point. His surrender was total and immediate. He had signed away his rights, his claims, and his presence in her life with the stroke of a pen. Emily had received a single pathetic text message from him. "I'm sorry. I never understood." She had deleted it without replying. Reports from her legal team painted a bleak picture of his new reality. He and Isabella were holed up in a rented condo in New Jersey, the press camped outside. His firm had collapsed. His partners had sued him. The SEC audit was real, and it had uncovered significant irregularities. Isabella, far from being the gloating victor, had reportedly been heard screaming at him that he had ruined her life. The great love story they had proclaimed had curdled into a bitter, claustrophobic nightmare of their own making. Emily felt a distant pity, but no more. Her focus was on the future, and it started here in this room that had been the site of her deepest humiliation. Her father had given her carte blanche. "The Montague is yours to manage," he'd said. "A project, something to focus on." She was standing with the lead architect for the Vance Foundation's charitable projects, a brilliant woman named Lena Petrova. "It has good bones," Lena said, her voice echoing in the empty space. "Classic proportions. What do you see for it, Emily?" Emily walked to the center of the room, to the very spot where she had stood isolated and alone. She remembered the hundreds of staring eyes, the whispers Isabella's venomous words. A lesser person might have demolished the place, erased it from the earth. But Emily was a Vance. They didn't erase history. They reshaped it to their will. "I see a place for the public," Emily said, her voice clear and strong. "This part of the city lacks a major cultural center. The Met is too far uptown for these communities. I want to turn this hall, this entire wing of the hotel, into the Vance Annex for contemporary art." Lena's eyebrows shot up in surprise and delight. "Emily, that's ambitious. The cost, the logistics. The foundation will fund it," Emily stated simply. "I want this to be a place of beauty, of learning, free admission. I want school children to come here and see their first masterpiece. I want struggling artists to have a place to display their work. I want to take a space that was built for private exclusionary luxury and turn it into something that gives back. We will transform a monument to vanity into a testament to creativity." She looked at the grand archway, where Isabella had made her entrance. "That," she said, pointing, "will be the main entrance. We'll tear down the doors. It should be open, welcoming. A place where no one ever feels uninvited." In that decision, something whole shifted within her. She wasn't just healing. She was creating. She was taking the ugliest moment of her life and using its foundations to build something beautiful and lasting. This was a power greater than buying a company or ruining an enemy. It was the power of transformation. Later that evening, back at the penthouse, Emily stood before a painting she had asked to be brought from the family's Boston estate. It was a portrait by Artemisia Gentileschi, a 17th-century female artist who had channeled her own trauma into powerful, defiant works of art. The painting depicted a strong-willed, intelligent woman gazing out at the viewer. Her expression neither happy nor sad, but filled with a deep, knowing resilience. Emily saw a reflection of herself not in the woman's face, but in her spirit. The pain of the last week was real, a scar she would always carry. But it was no longer a wound. It was a part of her story, the chapter that had ended a fairy tale and started an epic. She was no longer just a wife, a daughter, or a victim. She was Emily Vance, a patron, a builder, a force. She had found her own canvas, and she was just beginning to paint. And so Emily Vance walked away, not into an ending but a beginning. The story of that night became a legend in the city's elite circles, a cautionary tale about the difference between loud arrogance and quiet power. Marcus Thorne and Isabella Rossi disappeared from the high society pages, their names becoming synonymous with public humiliation. They got the future they wanted, but it was built on a foundation of scandal and social exile. But for Emily, the story was one of reclamation. She rediscovered her passion, not just for art, but for the legacy her family had built. She took an active role in the Vance Foundation, becoming one of the city's most respected philanthropists. She learned that true strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. And on that night, backed by the unwavering love of her family, she rose like a phoenix. What did you think of Emily's family's epic comeback? What would you have done in her shoes? Let us know in the comments below. And if you love stories where the underdog gets their ultimate satisfying revenge, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel. Click the notification bell so you won't miss another story of epic vindication and justice.